You need to have a little bit of confidence. And as I say, kind of like swagger, when you go into to give a speech or give a lecture or whatever, we have the saying like every talk is a job talk, even when you're giving the Nobel, prize, like one of the winners of the Nobel Prize who introduced me to the concept of the imposter syndrome within Nobel laureates, Barry Barish, who lives up in LA, not far from you probably, but he told me he never felt the imposter syndrome as strongly as when he won the Nobel Prize. And he's just such a humble person. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, yeah, when you win it, you have to prove, have to sign this logbook that shows that you got it and you got your $1 million, prize purse if you win, a share of it, some fraction of that. And he looked at it and he said, well, I wonder who won this before me. And he looked over and he saw, his former friend, Richard Feynman, who was at Caltech. He saw Marie Curie, whatever. And he saw Albert Einstein's signature live, right there. And he was just like, I'm not worthy. And I told him, I said, Barry, I love you. He's kind of like the lovable uncle that we all wish that we could have. And I just said, I have to tell you, Einstein felt incredible imposter syndrome. He said, really? And I said, yeah. He said he called Isaac Newton the greatest contributor, not only to physics, Candice, but also to Western civilization. Which is incredible. You think like, the laws of gravity, F equals ma, body in motion tends to stay in. No, to Western civilization, not just physics. And I said, it goes even further than that because Newton, the paradigm, this guy with this he felt tremendous imposter syndrome. And when asked who before whom he felt imposter before, he said, Jesus Christ. He said, Jesus Christ, is impossible to live up to, and I'm not worthy. In fact, he said Isaac Newton's greatest accomplishment was not physics or the laws of optics or alchemy or religion. He said that he died a virgin because that was the only way he could emulate Christ. And so I just feel like and guess what? Isaac Newton, Jesus Christ probably had people, Moses, so it never ends. We never get into this promised land, no matter what it is. But that should be good news because that means that there's always somewhere else to go. I don't know if you ever had Sam Harris on your show or you should, but he said something once, that I resonate with to a certain extent. He said, you can never be happy. Like you can only become happier, so to speak. You can only proceed along a direction that makes you more and more content and have equanimity. But you can never get there. And I translated that in my own nerdy way to this concept of entropy, which you're probably familiar with. But in case anybody's not, entropy is kind of a measure of the disorder or the chaos in a system, like how much things are in motion or non-organized, disorganization. So a pack of cards stacked neatly in order and all the suits and all the order of the suits, that's highly organized. And then when you give it to your son or one of my kids, throw it up in the air, it's totally disorganized, right? So the latter is more entropic. It has higher entropy, more randomness, more disorder. And I kind of liken what Sam said to kind of concept in physics of entropy in that when you're happy, let's say right now, Candice, how many ways could I increase your happiness 10x? If I want to just make you, so I could make you a Bitcoin billionaire. I mean, more than you already are.
An infinite amount of ways to level it up.
Well, there's an infinite number of ways, but how many yachts can you water ski behind? Just one.
Okay.
Even the richest kings and queens of yesteryear. I mean, we live better than them.
So do you think that there's a cap? There's a cap on happiness? I
would say that there's not a cap. You can always go up more. You bring more love into the world, more life into the world. But it's hard to double it, triple it. Because again, if you have $1 billion, another dollar more doesn't add, and $1 billion even doesn't add any more happiness to you. However, if I said to, I've had 4 billionaires on my show, including one who's lost 2 children, and any of us who are parents or just have loved ones that we treasure, we know there's infinite number of ways to make your life 100,000 billion times worse.
Right.
And so that's a statement of entropy. There's more, once you're as organized as possible and your life is pretty good, you can only go down, so to speak. I mean, you can go up, but it's easier to go down. And that's a concept of entropy. And I think that some of the concepts in the book relate to, when you win this prize, you might not, it might have been the thing as it was for me early on in life. I haven't won it, but I desperately wanted to win it as a 20-something, 30-something. And I didn't win it. And that was kind of crushing. But even those that win it, like I just said, it's not like what you think. It's not the promised land. It's not what you expect it to be. It never is.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between, and you describe this in your book, there's a difference between the people that just try to achieve greatness because they're curious and they're following something that that they're curious about or passionate about, or they're trying to like solve this, crazy riddle. And then there are people that are trying to check off all of these boxes in order to get the prize. Like the prize is the goal with the one example, and the other one is just curiosity, and seeing where that takes them. And I think when you're the person that's just trying to get this, I don't know, like accreditation or the recognition or this, esteem, whatever it is, like you're leaving your happiness external, right? Like it's all dependent on this external factor. And that's not sustainable, and that's super fragile too, because then if you don't get that, then what happens to your self-worth or your confidence? What happens to your research if you're not actually into that? And there's just so many ways that you kind of set yourself up for failure that way. And I think we all do it. It's obviously not a Nobel Prize for most people, but it is something. It's that bonus. It's a different award. It's getting that girl. It's getting that house. And it's just realizing like none of that is going to change your inner state. It might for a moment. And then all of a sudden you're still left with who you are and who you surround yourself with. So it's like checking those things. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I feel like, there's this obsession in most, cultures nowadays to achieve, which is great. Look, if we didn't have this notion of wanting to make the future better than the past, we wouldn't have Western medicine. We wouldn't have, the technology that allows you and I to communicate at the speed of light, and be sharing this with literally, thousands of people could watch us have this conversation, benefit from it, scale. And this power of kind of networks, which is another form of entropy, which is good. It has good things and bad things. But I think you're absolutely right. I think when you look for external validation, external satisfaction, you're not choosing yourself, as my friend and co-author of the foreword to the book, James Altucher, says. You're leaving it to these gatekeepers. And, I don't know much about your academic history, but I'm sure you remember in high school, like people want to get into the best college. You got to get good grades. You used to have to take the SATs. You don't have to anymore. But then in high school, for someone like me, so I'm a professor at a top research university in the world. I have an endowed, position. I'm very blessed to be here. I love what I do every day. I do it for free. Don't tell Gavin Newsom if you see him, because he might take me up on that. But to get here, it's worse than almost anything besides professional sports, because I had to beat out the most brilliant people to get into a good college. I went to Case Western in Ohio. I went to an Ivy League graduate school at Brown University. I went to Stanford and Caltech, and then I got an assistant professorship. Then I got tenure. Then I got a full professor. Then and it just never ends. And all those routes, you're not in control of your destiny. In fact, you're competing against those that might be superior to you. And we kind of lure people in, because we make it a little bit easier at all these steps until the last one, like the last one to become a professor and then certainly become a Nobel Prize winner. I mean, I chose the winners, or I was invited to choose the winners in 2015 of the 2016 Nobel Prize. And the only rule they had was that you can't choose yourself. You're not allowed to select your own name as the Nobel Prize winning, deserved Nobel Prize winner. So I felt this is kind of crazy, but you really can't. And then so you ask, well, how do I become kind of satisfied with what I have? For me, it's a lot of, my religion is Judaism, and we're very much focused on this very powerful lesson. As I keep saying, the promised land, that relates to Moses, the founder, the founding prophet and priest of Judaism. And he literally, was the last person, according to our tradition, to ever see God and talk to God face to face and so forth. And yet, for all he did, he never got to get into the land of Israel, which is the dream of, Jews for thousands of years. And so I think that's a powerful metaphor. Like how many, and also the rest of the Bible, which Jews read every year, 1/52nd of it every day, every week, none of the patriarchs or the matriarchs from Abraham, Sarah, Rachel, Leah, Jacob, none of them had an easy time conceiving like children. I find it very interesting because many of my friends, they just can't have kids or maybe don't want to have kids. And I find it very interesting because at the same time, you talked about aliens at the opening, and I want to get into that because that's really fun. But another thing that physicists are really, kind of concerned with is like, can we teleport? Can we time travel? Can we go through a wormhole or a black hole or some other kind of hole? I don't know. And get to another region of space time. And if so, like, what would you do? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, guys, we already have a method to teleport and time travel. And they're like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? I'm like, they're called kids. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you can't teleport your physical corporeal body, Candice. You can't move that and do that macro. We can teleport photons and electrons and properties of those things, but not the physical things. And nothing faster than the speed of light can travel. However, you can transport your values to your children. And it doesn't even have to be your children.